Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hey, I'm DJ Ross. I am in Mountain View, California.
Each week here on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. This week, we're looking back on our favorite games from 2021.
Oh, 2021, that distant year.
So unlike the year before.
So just completely different from all years that came before it.
Yep. I think 2020 deservedly get a lot of hate. As soon as we rolled into 2021, people were like, good riddance to that year.
Right.
And then it was kind of the same year. It was not significantly different. Your mileage may vary. I don't speak for everybody, of course, but, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of a lot of the same.
A lot of things were the same. That's true.
Everything old is new again.
I think in a lot of ways, it was better, though. I feel like overall it was a much better year. Still have a ways to go. Maybe 2022 is the answer. 2022, you got just way too many twos in that year. I'm already really tired of saying it.
Yep. I think of the poor people who make the number glasses on the New Year's Eve countdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for a while there, where they had all the zeros, they were doing pretty well. I mean,
Yeah.
If you made glasses that were in the shapes of numbers, 2000 and whatever was a pretty good year. But you roll into the 2022s at this point, it's kind of hard to make a pair of glasses out of that.
Yeah, you got to figure out what to do with that too for an entire decade. Although you would think, they just have to do one design and they're good for like 10 years. Right.
This is true. You're really just sort of updating the specs from the previous year.
Yeah. Although, who knows, maybe they have like a creative breakthrough. They figure out how to make the two in the 2023 goggles much better than the 2022 goggles. Who knows? Goggles, glasses, whatever they are.
In 2023, we just go full Blade Runner, and it's sort of like a 3D projection of a pair of glasses on your face.
Oh, I thought you were going to say just like a wraparound kind of like cyberpunk device. I don't know.
A Geordie LaForge future?
Yeah. When are those coming out? When
I
can
went
I get
Blade
some
Runner,
of those?
you went Geordie LaForge.
You went Geordie LaForge. I don't deserve any credit for that.
Whatever. I'll take it. I'll wear it happily.
Yeah. Let me call up my friend LeVar. Maybe he can hook me up with one of his extras.
Hey, it's 2022. There's a new Matrix movie all out. All like, fashion, super fashion, sci-fi bets are off.
That's true, yeah. Well, I mean, The Matrix is supposed to be in just 1999 forever, right? So, who knows? It wasn't a terrible year.
99? Yeah. Despite sort of the looming threat of all electronics just sort of shutting off at midnight. But
oh, yeah. But I mean, nobody really thought that was going to happen, right?
I don't know if I was smart enough or cared enough or engaged enough to pay a lot of attention to it.
Did you have a millennial bunker ready to go? Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't have a bunker, but I did have a moment at like 12:01 a.m. on January 1st where I went outside of my apartment. I remember specifically where I lived at that point. I was in Connecticut.
Listen for the airplanes falling out of the sky.
And just waited for the chaos. Yeah, I was like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen right away. And nothing came. So, I mean, it was just the usual chaos. It was not new or special chaos.
Right. Well, maybe next year.
Right. There's always some new and unusual chaos around the corner.
Gotta watch for that 2023 bug.
Whatever the next variant is, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's not the kind of bug I was talking about, but yeah, you should be careful about that one.
That's where I thought you were going with that. But yeah, so, we're going to talk about highlights from the previous year, good things that came out of 2021, like a collection of video games that you and I really enjoyed.
Yeah. Only good games on this episode.
Yep, no bad games.
Yeah. Speaking of good games, or good things, I guess. It's a new year. We have some new music, this time from Protodome. You heard on the way in. And you will hear again on the way out just some lovely chip stuff from his Bandcamp page. A UK-based jazz artist, heavily influenced by the chiptune genre. So it's a little jazzy. If you're wondering about that, you are correct.
Interesting.
Also, this is especially notable. The first artist we have featured on here who is a PhD holder. At least, I mean, I didn't research this at all, but so at least one of them.
Have you done the legwork on this? Can you make a statement that bold?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, the first one that I know of. So that's impressive.
Sure.
But anyway, we're thrilled to have Protodome's music. So thank you very much. If you want to hear more of that jazzy chip-inspired sound, you can go to protodome.bandcamp.com, of course, and listen to some more. Maybe buy an album or two.
Cool. All right, so we have a lot of video games we want to talk about this week. Do you just want to jump into this thing?
Well, do we need any ground rules for this? I was surprised. I was listening to a lot of people's like Game of the Year countdowns at the end of the year last year, and so many of them seemed like weirdly adversarial. Like they were debates almost, or they were like trying to just narrow it down to the one definitive Game of the Year, which I feel like is not really our vibe. But then it just got me thinking, like, should it be?
I think if you and I had to cobble together like a collaborative top 5 or top 10, like 10 games that you and I agree are the best of the year, I think that would be difficult.
I think it would. I think the last year we could have agreed on a game would have been like Portal 2.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, there are occasionally overlaps in our interests in the types of games that we play. There is not enough of that for you and I to sort of, I think, on friendly terms, assemble a top 10 that we agree on.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe this should be a little less friendly than usual. No, I'm just kidding. I don't like the sound
good
of that
vibes only for 22. I thought that
good
was the
vibes.
plan.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's true. Good vibes only. Good games only.
So yeah, I've one of the music podcasts that I listen to, they do a year-end wrap-up, and the two hosts tend to duke it out a little bit, kind of on the pod, where they state the case, for what they think the best record of the year should be, and I don't know if they ever get anywhere or come to a mutually agreed upon solution, or if it's all planned in advance, but it does. It feels a little more cantankerous than I would generally like our show to be.
I'm just putting my notes here, less cantankerous.
Correct.
All right.
VGH 525, less cantankerous.
Right, exactly. Well, so much for that idea. I mean, I think you're right. It would be difficult for us to eliminate games on either of our lists without just, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the games that I see on your list were games that I kind of wanted to play, but I just didn't get around to.
Oh, interesting. There are no games on your list I want to play.
Of course.
No, Chicory. I would like to play that one, yeah. I just gave away one
giving
of
it
your games.
away? All right.
I apologize.
All right.
Yeah, you can give away one of mine
it
if
is.
you'd like now. Yeah.
No, it's fine. Battlefield 2042.
Our lists do not overlap in any way. They have in the past. We've agreed upon Animal Crossing. I think last year we agreed landed in our top 5s.
What a shock.
I know, right? That is on brand, I think. But
I think people were expecting it to be in your top 5 this year.
If I thought I could justify it somehow, I would put it in there. It is certainly the game this year that I spent the most hours with. But the part of that game that was new this year is the Happy Island Designer, or whatever it's called. Paradise. Happy Home Paradise? Is that what it's called?
I believe that's right.
One of us should know this.
You would think.
You would think at least one of us would know the correct answer for whatever the new Animal Crossing game is. But I didn't play the new one yet. I have not dipped into that. I've just been playing vanilla Animal Crossing, have not explored the thing that was new last year. So I can't stand by that. Shocking, I know.
I have a question. As long as we're talking about stuff that we are not informed about, is that like a separate game? Do you have to like leave your Animal Crossing New Horizons game and then load up this other thing in order to play that, or do you just go somewhere within New Horizons to do all that new stuff?
You go to the airport. And you talk to the little guy at the ticket counter, and you say, "Hey, I want to go to work."
Okay.
And he puts you on a plane and flies you out to the little island paradise where you can design homes for villagers.
Okay, well that's good. That seems like a good way to integrate it.
It doesn't have its own front end, though. You can't like boot it up from the menu and play it without actually going to your airport in the New Horizons game.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I think that would be a huge turnoff if it was like a separate thing.
Well, that's how they handled it in the previous generation when the new Leaf came out, and then a couple of years later there was the Happy Home Designer or whatever it was called for that generation. It was a separate game. You started up Happy Home Designer, and it was like, create a character. And I was like, I already have a character.
Yeah, well, that's just weird.
Yeah, so I had to make another character that hopefully looked just like the one from the previous game. So it's better. It's more satisfying now that they're kind of unified worlds. And there's stuff you can take back. I've read this as well, that you learn techniques and you get items and things like that in Paradise that you can bring back to vanilla Animal Crossing. And
yeah, that seems like the kind of the major appeal, unless you're just really into the interior design aspect.
Yeah, more stuff.
Yeah. But anyway, neither of us played that game, so it's not on our list.
No, let's not talk for 20 minutes about a game neither of us played.
How about the Halo Infinite? No, never mind.
No.
Let's just get into it. What is rounding out your top 5 this year?
Little Nightmares 2.
Ah, that was last year?
That was this year. It came out in, I think, April of this year.
Oh, it was a long year.
It's a very, very long year. It's hard to believe that was this year. But Little Nightmares. I like the Little Nightmares series. The first one was great. Second one is a prequel to the first one. Just a weird sort of choice, but interesting. These are sort of like Limbo or like Inside, these sort of dark, moody kind of side-scrolling platforming games. Little Nightmares series has a very overt, scary as shit kind of vibe to it, where you play a very tiny person with a lot of large things that are trying to kill you or eat you.
Sounds horrible.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty terrifying at some parts. I think probably even more terrifying if you're a parent and you have a little kid at home. You're playing this video game about little kids being in peril. It's probably tough. Maybe I'm not selling this.
No, I remember reading about accounts of parents playing this or like being unable to play it because they would be like, normally I would be into a horror game like this, but I just can't do it when it's like a little kid in peril the whole time.
Yeah, that's rough. I take these games. I think they're one at the most basic fun. They are super spooky horror. Lots of surprisingly horrific things that the game sort of dreams up as you go into any new room, any new scenario, any new little area in the game. It is really good at throwing some new terror at you, which the game had not previously sort of telegraphed in some way. So it's good at sort of like you hear a creepy noise, you hear something rattling at the end of the hallway, you see something moving in the shadows, and you think, oh Christ, what fresh hell is this waiting for me now? And yeah, it's probably a very sort of specific personality that takes joy in that. I am just that personality. I like these games. It's a lot of fun. I like a good platformer. I think that sort of pushes good buttons for me too. These are very well thought out, very sort of meticulously designed from a level perspective. There is some frustrating kind of trial and error kind of stuff where that was super cheap. I can't believe I died there. But they're good at getting you back into the action pretty quickly and giving you little opportunity to kind of figure out where you went wrong and fine tune your approach. It's generally something very large and scary chasing after you that you're trying to sort of like, how do I flip these switches or open these locks or get inside this door or whatever fast enough for this thing to not come and get me? And there's a lot of that in Little Nightmares too.
Did you ever play The Missing, that sweary game?
I did not, no.
Might be interested. Maybe you should check it out. I was just thinking like the closest similar games I played to this are like Limbo and Inside, like you mentioned. But then I was just like, The Missing is actually sort of this like puzzle platformer format with spooky stuff chasing you periodically.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I'll have to look that up. The Inside too. I mean, I would stand by that. It's probably one of my favorite games of the last 10 years. That game is great.
Oh yeah.
I would strongly recommend. If you've not, if you like this, if the thought of a spooky side scroller with a lot of freaky shit happening really appeals to you, I would absolutely recommend Inside.
Yeah, very good. Another game that is just unapologetic about murdering little kids, but who knows what's going on with that studio.
Yes, that's true. Those games are definitely small person in peril throughout. Yeah, that would be tough.
I'm waiting for that new one to come out. I can't remember the name. It's like a town name or something, because I was like, oh, Limbo, all about this, murdering this little boy over and over. Oh, weird. Inside is about the same thing. Kind of a weird trend. Let's see if the third one establishes whether that is actually a trend or if it was just, weird coincidence. Because I don't know. At some level, it's kind of disturbing. I mean, it's very disturbing, but we'll see if that is just their wheelhouse or whatever. But speaking of games that I had forgotten came out in the last year, I'm going to kick off my list with Monster Hunter Rise, which, believe it or not, was 2021. Seems like
it rolls back to the early part of the year as well, right?
Yeah, it was like February or March. For some reason, they decided that they like the early year releases for these Monster Hunter games. But I was very pleasantly surprised. At this point, a new Monster Hunter game feels almost routine to me. Although coming right off of Monster Hunter World, it was kind of up in the air what sort of direction this one would go in. Mm-hmm. And I was very pleasantly surprised that they actually addressed a lot of the complaints and kind of fears I had about the the direction of the series following Monster Hunter World after it made its leap from these like handheld platforms to a fully next-gen platform with extremely fancy graphics and online features and everything.
Yeah. Right. World definitely sort of embraced the lifestyle game, the games as service kind of thing.
Yeah, which was actually one of my big issues with World, was the way they handled sort of the rotating event quests and like limited time content and stuff like that. And much to my surprise, the way it works in Monster Hunter Rise is very similar to how it used to work before World, where like stuff would just come out and then it would be in the game and you didn't have the FOMO of like, I'm not going to be able to do this event enough during the time it's available, so I'll just have to wait half a year to, do whatever. Or like maybe you just don't have time to play it that month and you completely miss out on stuff, which was a huge drag for me playing Monster Hunter World.
Yeah.
But aside from that, they also like really trimmed down sort of the story aspect, which people seem to be clamoring for. And I think they really overdid it in Monster Hunter World. But Rise, on the other hand, feels just like this really streamlined, really accessible, easy to play, or at least for Monster Hunter series veterans, installment of Monster Hunter. And they added a bunch of cool new tricks to it as well, like the wire bug, which is super fun. So I was very happy with this. I don't know if I played it as much as World for whatever reason, because, I just played a lot of that game. But overall, I think I enjoyed it much, much more, and I am looking forward to seeing where else they take the series from this. I hope they sort of continue to build on the lessons that they put into Monster Hunter Rise with the next installment, or there's like an expansion of this coming out, I think this year. So I guess I'm looking forward to that as well.
Cool. Do you feel like there's like segmentation in the Monster Hunter fandom? Are there people who are kind of world purists, and there are people who are kind of old school Monster Hunter purists? Do you think that there is more overlap between those two things?
I think it's hard to tell, and like part of the reason for that is just I haven't been following the community as closely since Rise came out, and also a lot of it is that so much of the Monster Hunter community at this point came in with World, so that's like all they know. But right. I have seen a lot of posts from people who are like, hey, I started with Monster Hunter World, and I never played another Monster Hunter game before this, and I was curious, so I went back and played one of the older games, and they're very surprised they end up liking it better than World, or at least they have some
Oh.
thoughtful contrasts on what those games do differently than World does. I feel like the biggest complaint I heard about Rise was that it didn't have as much in like the base game as World had when it came out, which I don't know. I kind of roll my eyes at that a little bit because like, there's just so much to do in this game, and World was enormous. I don't know what people are expecting.
It was a whole world, guys.
yes, exactly. But I don't know. I didn't really have that issue with Rise when it came out, or even like several weeks or months into it as they started adding patches and new monsters to it.
Yeah.
So looks good from where I'm standing. I hope the hope the community is having a good reaction to it as well.
I mean, it seems like sort of the not enough content thing, and maybe this is a conversation for a separate show, but is the sort of the trendy complaint about video games in the last 3 or 4 years, where it's, it feels like anytime any one of these games comes out, inevitably there are sequels to previous ones. People are like, oh, they rushed it. Oh, there's not enough here. Has no end game, has no post game.
Yeah.
You might have pretty high expectations for what a video game should include.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating because sometimes a game should just be allowed to end, and then you can you could go on to the next thing. I mean, I love playing a game forever. If you're really into that, that's cool. But it's just not sustainable with every game, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, there's always more games.
Yeah, there's always more games. Speaking of more games, what other games do we have?
My one of my other favorites for the year, my number 4 pick for last year was Inscryption. So staying in the neighborhood of kind of spooky games that play with your head a little bit. Inscryption is, at its most basic, kind of a collectible card game, a deck building game, which I'm a big fan of, have become a big fan of for the last couple of years. A lot of it is kind of chasing the high of Slay the Spire. That game is so good, and it's unfortunate that it was the first one that I played because it really sets the bar, I think, for every other deck building game that comes afterwards. And a lot of these kind of do interesting things or have an interesting perspective on how that works in a video game. I think Inscryption is the one thus far that I have found as compelling and surprising as Slay the Spire was.
Wow.
Yeah, the hook here is that you're in a spooky cabin in the woods with a mysterious opponent, and you are playing a card game kind of against them. But they are very unreliable. They are very menacing. They will lie to you sometimes. They will hide information from you. There is a whole kind of narrative and relationship and a thread that sort of builds between you and this sort of mysterious kind of opponent throughout the course of this game. On the table, it's a very cool, super compelling collectible card game where you're always just trying to sort of outflank, outplay, outrun the person across the table. But there is this whole other sort of secondary piece of the narrative that is not the card game. That is, why am I in this mysterious cabin in the woods? Who is this person in the shadows I'm playing this game against? Why can't I leave?
And you go and do things other than play the card game at points, right?
You do, yeah. At certain points, you do get up from the table and you wander around the cabin. And previous players of the game have hidden little clues around and little things inside the cabin. And it is full of kind of mysterious artifacts that will, prompt a little dialogue and interaction with your opponent. And it's just it does a lot to kind of create a world around the relatively sterile sort of concept of you sitting at a table and playing a card game. It is very cool. I find it super compelling. I generally don't play a lot of PC games because I don't like sitting in front of my PC for hours and hours. Mm-hmm. Inscryption is the exception to that. I've put quite a few hours just sitting at my desk playing a video game on the computer, like the olden days. And
just playing solitaire.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I am literally dying for a mobile version of this. Like
you're
every
not literally
week I Google,
dying. Come on.
I'm not literally. I am figuratively dying for a version of this on the Switch that I can leave, like take out of the house with me and play when I should be working. No, I'm kidding. It's really good. There's a narrative to it, but it does sort of beget itself to just sitting down and playing a couple of runs like you would play in Slay the Spire. It's a game that I think sort of accomplishes a lot of really interesting things in a really unique construct.
Oh, so this is also sort of like there's the expectation that you play multiple attempts at this. It's not like one continuous playthrough necessarily.
Yeah, I think it services both of those. Like I said, there is kind of an overarching narrative. It does have a finale, an end game. It does have sort of other things I can't talk about that are kind of unique and surprising and sort of happen on a cadence or on a timeline of a playthrough. But it also does sort of lend itself to just being kind of pick up and play, that you can kind of hop into the game and play a few rounds of cards and dig a little deeper into this thing.
Nice.
Yeah, perhaps not as sort of like cut and dry as just going for a run through a Slay the Spire kind of experience, but it definitely is sort of consumable in smaller bits if you want to play it that way.
Interesting. Yeah, this is one of the ones on your list where I was like, I should check this out probably, but I just didn't get around to it. Too many games.
It's really good, very cool. Indie developer who I've never played any of their games before. They've made a few in the past, but just this feels so just meticulously thought out and designed. It's got a very unique kind of even color palette and aesthetic to it. Just every element of this little indie game feels just labored over, it's absolutely just a very memorable experience. Would highly recommend.
Nice. I will check it out at some point.
Yeah. And this is called, and just to go back, because I haven't said it in a little bit, this is called Inscryption.
With a Y, like you're in a
Y.
In a crypt.
Crypt in the middle, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Inscryption.
Speaking of crypts, I spent a lot of time last year playing, wait for it.
That was your best segue ever. That was really good.
Pretty good, right?
Go ahead, sorry, I stepped on your thing, yeah.
Played a lot of dungeon encounters last year. Oh, here it is. Oh, nice. You're waiting for it. Man, weird game. Really weird. Yeah. If you missed the episode where I talked about it, this is the game where you're basically on a big board game map, and you just get into like RPG battles with static portraits of monsters. It's like the lowest budget looking title that has come out in some time. I mean, probably not even true, but just like in terms of presentation, it is so sort of like there's so much restraint. It's so simplified. But as a result, the battle mechanics really shine. And they're not even that complex either, but it's just whittled down to just the basics of RPG combat. You have like a very narrow variety of physical and magical attacks, and that's pretty much it. It's just very few frills in this game, but it's just oddly fascinating to play something that is just so focused on doing this one thing. And I have to say, it does it pretty well. You wouldn't think that a game where you just spend probably 90% of the time in random encounters, essentially, would, you think you get tired of it pretty quickly. But yeah. I spent so many hours playing this. I couldn't tell you why. I mean, I guess like the battles are actually pretty fun, and there's a good amount of strategy and sort of like tactics involved, which I appreciate. But the whole time I'm playing it looks hilarious because it looks like you're just running around like a little 3D minifig on a crossword puzzle. And then you get into a fight with just like a painting of a dragon or a chair that is holding a bunch of swords. And it's just weird. Just weird game.
I'm intrigued by this. It definitely does not look like a stunner. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, here's your next gen game. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely not.
The crossword puzzle thing is the thing I keep coming back to, because I remember in our Discord somebody shared the trailer for this, probably you, when it first came out or was sort of being teased, and I was like, what is this? It's a crossword puzzle game? I don't get it. And then hearing you describe it on the show, and that it's sort of this like perfect kind of distillation of all of these, flourishy things that tend to get packed into RPGs. It's lean on character, it's lean on story, it's, combat super distilled and drilled down, but it still somehow manages to be as compelling as you're saying it is. So I don't know that I would like it, but I'm intrigued by it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it'd be your thing. It's pretty intense, but it's just so it's so brisk. It's so easy to get into a battle and plan out all your attacks and just get on to the next battle. I don't know. It's just very refreshing. Because I like, as much as JRPGs have become about epic sprawling storylines and 100-hour plots with all these very complicated characters. When I got into them, it was just Dragon Quest 1 and Final Fantasy IV, which admittedly was already had a pretty heavy story component, but there was always just the battle system, which was fascinating, and this kind of brings it back to the JRPG roots there. So I'm also just amazed that they this got greenlit. They're just let's make that game that has really no graphics or cinematics or anything. It's just such a modest presentation, but it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to be, right, if you're going to sort of boil off all of the other flourishes that would get put into an RPG.
Yeah,
you got to have the thing that is left at the end has to be compelling, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I just think the way that I sort of consume RPGs is inevitably later into the game. It's me trying to get to the next objective while avoiding as much combat as possible because I'm just over it at that point. I don't want to run into any monsters. I don't, if I'm playing Yakuza Like a Dragon, I see that other gang coming up the street, I'm going to cut over 3 blocks to try to get away from them.
Yeah.
Because I've done it. I've done the combat thing. I know how it ends. I know where it's going to go. I just want to get to the next story beat. And again, I find it very intriguing that there's a game that sort of has taken all of those other distractions out of it and just sort of stands on that one principle.
Yeah. There's really very little to look forward to in this other than just getting better equipment and watching your party's numbers go up.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a very distilled experience. I didn't finish it, which I'm a little regretful about because I like to be able to speak about the entire game. That is one sort of probably the biggest pitfall is that it is fairly repetitive, and despite it not having a 100-hour JRPG plot, it is quite lengthy. There's a lot of floors in the dungeon to get through. So I don't know if it's realistic that I will ever get all the way to the end, but I certainly enjoyed my time with it.
Excellent. Cool. My next game actually is similarly a game that I did not yet, unfortunately, see the end of. But I really liked everything that I played up to the point where I had to step away, and that's Death's Door. This is an uncharacteristically difficult game for me that does not have a lot of fun little bells sliders inside of it to turn down the intensity of the combat or anything like that. There is no kind of Nintendo hand holding in Death's Door.
Oh, I thought it did. There's really nothing.
I don't remember there being anything, and I remember being kind of super frustrated because I like the characters that were in, and I found the story and the world kind of compelling and interesting. I kept wanting to go back to it, but I just kept getting my ass handed to me. And couldn't find a way to, cheat my way through it essentially.
Yeah,
so,
practice.
I've not seen the credits roll on Death's Door, but spent quite a lot of hours with it up to that point. The hook here is that you're a little crow, a little raven. I know they're not the same animal. Don't send me emails. That is a Grim Reaper, essentially. You are employed to collect souls. There is a little office building that you go back to that's your hub, where they dole out jobs for you, and it's people whose time is up. And you are sent on a mission to collect a few souls that have avoided death, that have overstayed their welcome, and are now becoming corrupt and a little too powerful. So you're trying to track down these souls that have lingered for too long. It has a very unique aesthetic and kind of world built around it. It has kind of a funny little sense of humor about it. It has a very sort of intense and in-depth combat system with a lot of like dodges and parries and different weapons that you have at your disposal at any given time. It's really good at like herding you into a corner and putting up a bunch of invisible walls while, armies of the undead crawl out of graves and try to kill you. It looks kind of cute and funny and a little Legend of Zelda-y on the kind of on the surface, but there is a layer of kind of intensity and kind of darkness to it that goes beyond, I think, anything that's been happening in Zelda. And certainly the combat is much more intense than your average Zelda game.
Sure.
These are not your kind of 3-pattern attack bosses that you get in kind of every Legend of Zelda game. These are very aggressive combatants who will just wipe the floor with you if you make a bad choice. So yeah, it was a bit of a push-pull for me because I found that combat compelling. I just could not sort of like, I couldn't hang with it after a while. The game kept getting tougher and my sort of ability to keep up with it tapped out at a certain point. I'm not getting better at this. I'm not keeping up with the intensity of the monsters and the enemies that they're throwing at me. You're a Grim Reaper. Things don't want to die. They fight back. So I get that. But I'm not hanging anymore. I'm not being able to put up enough of a fight to find it to make my way through it. But that did not deter me. I played quite a few hours with this thing. I really, really liked it. I had a lot of fun with it. I think it's, I think like Inscryption, like Little Nightmares, I think it is this very assembled by a group of folks who had a very sort of clear vision of what this world was going to be like and sort of what the rules were for this little slice of the universe, how things were going to interact and just, again, cranked up the intensity of those enemies to a pretty high level. It makes it feel really good and really sort of satisfying to get through some of the early ones to kind of, on your 26th attempt at a boss to take them down and win and be good at that. It ultimately got to the point where I felt like I just kept throwing myself at some of these bosses and not making any progress.
Yeah, sounds very, very Dark Souls. I hate saying that, but
yeah.
Or like Hollow Knight or one of those games where combat is very technical and is more about like player improvement,
right?
Than leveling up or something like that.
And I thought kind of early hours, like first 5 or 6 hours of this thing, I think this is one of those games. This is my Hollow Knight. This is my Blood Soaked. Is that what the game is called? What was that one called? Like a
Nope. Dark Souls game? I was going to say...
Like a Dark Souls.
There was Bloodstained, but that was like a Castlevania thing.
Yeah, that's not the one I'm thinking of. What's the other From Software game that has blood?
Bloodborne. Yeah.
Bloodborne. That's the one I was thinking of. Maybe this is my Bloodborne. Maybe this is my Souls-like. And for a while it was. I think those games have never really appealed to me, and I'm not interested in, I don't know, fighting over and over and over for hours to try to get through a single boss.
Sure.
And losing all my progress and having to start over. And Death's Door felt kind of brisk enough and quick enough and sort of achievable enough to get through it. And I found everything, like the rest of the packaging, the characters, the world, etc., super compelling. So that kept me going. Just at a certain point, could not go further and had to admit I was defeated.
Yeah, I was really hoping you would stick this one out. Maybe at some point later on you'll get the inspiration to go back to it and get your second wind.
Yeah, liked it enough to include it on my list. It's my number 3 game of the year. I think I stand by that. I had enough fun with this and spent enough hours with it to be able to include it and rank it highly, but just unfortunately have not seen the credits roll.
Yeah, well, this is the other one on your list that I want to check out. I think it was Xbox exclusive for a while, but now it's on other stuff. So maybe this year.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It was Xbox. I was on the Game Pass, which is where I played it initially, and now it's on Switch and stuff. So,
yeah,
would recommend Death's Door.
Speaking of Microsoft Game Pass, I don't know if this is on Game Pass or not. Played a lot of Chicory. Played all of Chicory, actually. Chicory: A Colorful Tale. The game about a little cartoon dog with a paintbrush that was. I feel like it got snubbed at a lot of Game of the Year lists. I feel like it got overlooked. But I had such a good time with this. I don't know what it was. I don't know what I was playing right before this. Probably dungeon encounters. We're just going by the number of hours played. But it just felt like a refreshing break from all the other games that people were talking about at the time. It's just a wholesome experience. Just, I don't know if there are any negative things I can say about this. It had its share of like boss battles, but in this case, it is one of those games where if you're, running into any sort of frustration at all, it gives you a bunch of levers and knobs you can turn to make all of that go away.
Oh, nice.
But I had such a good time. It's just a fun, very lighthearted story, even though it touches on some serious subjects. But the really surprising thing was that you have this magic paintbrush, and you're sort of encouraged to just repaint all of the environments in the game and like all of the characters and objects that you run into. And you're not really required to do it. I mean, you have to do it to solve some of the puzzles. But I found myself just spending way more time just lingering on a lot of the screens in this game, just being like, well, maybe I'll just paint everything in on the screen before moving on, because that would be fun. And it's just a very relaxing thing to do.
Oh, it's fun.
Yeah, so very unique and unusual. I can't really think of another game that had a kind of a creative component like this. But highly recommended. Terrific soundtrack by Lena Raine. We heard a little bit of on our end of year music show.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely check it out if you're just looking for something that is kind of like... It feels the most like a Zelda game to me, in the sense that you are just exploring an overworld and kind of doing some light questing along the way. But there are no enemies that sort of interrupt you or disturb you as you're making your way around. It's just you and your paintbrush and some interesting environmental puzzles.
Cool. Yeah, I've seen, to your point, does not pop up a lot in other kind of year-end game lists, but the few instances where I have seen it come up, it's generally recommended as like a family game or something to sort of consume with others, or to play with your kids and things like that. And I'm like, oh, it's generally I don't see a trailer for a video game that sort of reaches for that and find it compelling. Maybe Animal Crossing notwithstanding, but I'm intrigued by this. It sounds really, really cool, and I think I would probably spend a lot of time with it. So I'm curious to get a chance to play it.
Yeah, I think you would be into it. You mentioned the family thing, or just sort of the group play atmosphere, which reminds me that there is some sort of like co-op mode, which I never really thought about because I just played a single player.
Right.
I always just thought about, so the second player just has their own paintbrush and they're painting stuff in. But I guess that would change sort of like how you solve some of the puzzles quite a bit, so that might be interesting. I don't know if the second player has their own character that they are controlling, or they're just a disembodied brush. But yeah, if you have someone else who is interested in playing it, that would be worth checking out.
Cool. My my number 2 sort of answers the question that came up in our Drunktacular episode. Will Randy's number 1 game of the year be Ratchet and Clank or Psychonauts 2?
Or Animal Crossing. That's still on the table.
Was it still on the table? So my number 2 of the year, and this will help anybody who's sort of keeping track, is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart.
Aha.
Aha.
So Animal Crossing is number 1, clearly.
So there you go. Yes. I didn't realize you were so in the pocket of the Animal Crossing vote, DJ.
Just going by the numbers.
Yeah, so Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Pretty much the reason I wanted a PS5. It is pretty much the only game I've played at length on the PS5. It is just a sort of a really sort of delightful embracing of the things that make Ratchet and Clank games compelling to players like myself. Again, kind of at its most basic, just a really satisfying, big 3D world with you running around with a bunch of cool guns and, explosive things and taking on a bunch of, robots and robot pirates and robot other things that are robots, and blowing them up real good and, collecting all of the things hidden in a secret world, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's, all of those elements that make platformers and mascot platformers like Mario Brothers and things like that super compelling. But after 20 years of these games, I feel invested. I'm kind of into the Ratchet and Clank thing. I like the relationship between the two of them. I like that this game does sort of the unique thing of separating Ratchet and Clank for much of the game, and sort of pointing them in two different directions and bouncing back and forth between the two of them. I like that it feels like the only thing I've ever played thus far that really feels like it could not have been possible on other software. Like, it feels like this could only happen on the PS5. That it is kind of huge worlds, like load time free. It has this whole rift thing where you pull yourself into other kind of pocket dimensions and universes and things like that with a little tether that just happens kind of instantaneously. So there's some mysterious voodoo happening in the background that makes all of that possible. Yeah, it's just super satisfying, super fun to play. It does kind of bring the heat sometimes. There is an arena mode in here where you go to a mysterious kind of cantina planet. Every sci-fi movie and game has one, apparently.
Sure.
And they have an arena where you can just fight wave after wave of killer robots with your crazy arsenal of weapons. It gets intense. It gets really, really nuts. And some of the best upgrades and some of the best little things that you can kind of unlock in the game are hidden behind you making progress there and leveling up. So I find myself locked in arena mode and trying to make some progress. Wow. And then jetting back out into the world and looking for the next little story beat, the next kind of cool character encounter, the next big crazy showpiece of, Clank rail grinding through a disintegrating universe at high speed and trying to avoid, getting smashed, and also shooting up killer robots and things like that. Just, I don't know. This is kind of my game. This feels like designed perfectly in almost every way to sort of satisfy the things I like about video games.
Well, I'm shocked. It's 2 games on your list with arena battles, which I thought were something that you just, hit the power button as soon as they pop up.
Yeah. That generally in the past has been a deal breaker for me. But you can make it fun. I'm in it. I'm in there. I'm there for it. I think I have no problem with it. It's just when it feels super punishing, like I don't have a possible chance, that, I tap out.
That's the secret. Just make it fun. Don't put those bad arena battles in your games.
Yeah, just good ones.
Yeah. Only the good ones.
So yeah, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. There's a lot to this. There's a lot about sort of relationships, about the people you spend your time with. There's a lot about, the things you take for granted. Ratchet is a hero. Rivet, his counterpart, is kind of a loser. But the two of them sort of have value and balance each other out kind of nicely. So this, again, I think, 20 years in, they're doing more work with these characters than they really need to. But it's just, it's kind of a cool little gift for folks like me, maybe, who have paid attention for this long.
I'm surprised to hear that, you're that invested in the story component, because I knew these always had, I don't know, they felt like on some level they're trying to be like a Pixar movie or something, like an interactive movie, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I never really expected the quality of the story to go anywhere, really. But I guess after this long, you've had so much time you spent with these characters, and they've been able to develop them enough that I guess I could see that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you would take that from it if you've not played all of them. I really think there's a bit of an emotional component, a bit of a nostalgia component to this thing at this point. I've played Ratchet and Clank games for a long time, and I find it super satisfying when a new one comes out, but it's I think they're doing big work here. I think they're doing interesting things from a developer standpoint to keep it fresh and engaging and interesting, whether it's your first attempt at playing one of these. Like I suspect Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is probably going to be for a lot of people who have a PS5 and are itching for something to play. Or if you've played all of these before and, this is your 17th Ratchet and Clank game.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool.
So, yeah.
Speaking of the 17th game in a series, I feel like it's almost been forgotten at this point, but Probably the breakout success story and one of the best games I played last year was Valheim.
Yeah.
Just a weird sort of situation around this game. Came out in early access and just sort of exploded on Steam. It's like kind of the open world procedural survival game. It's been a while since I talked about it, I think. But you play as a Viking party, and you start out just scavenging in the wilderness, trying to like cobble together a settlement, and eventually you go out and explore the world and fight monsters and figure out what sort of mysteries are out there. And this just feels like lightning in a bottle in terms of all the things that went right with this game. It was just like a bunch of my friends jumped into it. We knew very little. We knew like almost nothing about how the game worked or what we could expect. So that was a huge factor in just adding to the mystique of it. But it was just so addicting to like build a little settlement and slowly inch farther and farther out into the wilderness to try and figure out just like what you can do in Valheim. And it's, I don't know if this team has worked on anything else. It was like a super small team at the time of the early access launch. It was like 5 or 6 people.
Oh, wow.
So like the design decisions and like all the balancing they did in this game worked out so well, because it was just like this perfect mix of exploration and discovery and like the world actually being dangerous but not too punishing, because you naturally want to go out and do all this exploration, but you have to be super careful because like there's a lot of scary and dangerous stuff out there. But at the same time, if one of your expeditions went awry, it wouldn't be a huge setback, because you would just like restart back at your base. And it's like to the point where like my friends and I pretty much wrapped up playing what there is to play at this point in the game, and we've been looking for a replacement. And there's just nothing out there that like checks the same boxes. They're all just like these hardcore survival simulators where like you don't play it correctly, you just starve to death in 24 hours and then you have to roll an entirely new character. Or, they'll do like 80% of the things we liked about Valheim, but just not this one other thing. And it's like, oh man, it's surprising how many of these things are just deal breakers. But it's also just surprising that they did everything as well as they did in just this weird early access game. I thought it was just so good. Spent a lot of time, like over 100 hours playing this thing.
Wow. Yeah, this came out of nowhere. It was like I was seeing a lot of posts and screenshots and things about Valheim on Twitter, and I was like, what is this game? Where did this come from?
Yeah.
And yeah, it definitely seemed to sort of like quickly catch fire, and then it went away. At least in terms of my visibility of it, I wasn't looking for it, but just the way that it sort of came into my view, it did seem to go dark pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's your experience with it or not, but it does feel like it had a pretty short shelf life, it felt like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is one of the unfortunate victims of that the forever game expectation. Because the team, like very small team again, had this whole roadmap for all these updates they wanted to do, because it's in early access. It's not technically finished. Like you could go to areas in the game that were sort of built out, but there'd be like no wildlife or resources there. They're almost sort of like you expect to see a big under construction sign as soon as you land your boat there. So there's definitely the expectation that they still have work to do on this game. But the way people just like latched onto it and just consumed all of it within a few weeks of the early access launch kind of put them in a weird spot where they were like trying to deal with all this newfound success, and I assume sort of grow the team and the company just so they can concentrate on building the actual product.
Sure.
But I feel like a lot of people dropped off, and because there just wasn't anything left to do, really, unless you wanted to roll a whole new world to play around in, which is totally like a viable option. Like you could do that. But My group and I definitely got into that situation where we had just done pretty much everything, and we're like, yeah, we'd love it if there was more to do in this game, but we've also like done a lot already, so I don't know. Like, it's okay if games just end at some point, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. I mean, I didn't realize that it was still in early access. I mean, at some point they will no longer be in early access. They will have a finished game that they can sort of like maybe get a second act on. You maybe get a second. Hey, remember this thing?
Maybe.
It's there's all this stuff now. It's new.
Yeah, it's too bad. Like, I feel bad for them because it was so popular and the game is so good, despite it still has some rough edges. That I feel like they really deserve to just maintain that audience until they can like put out the final product or whatever their final vision for it was. But It's just taken them way, way longer than anybody expected to come out with updates, to the point where people were just like, are they going to be any more updates? Are they just all rich now? They don't need to make games anymore? I don't know. But I mean, they have released some stuff, and I'm trying not to be totally cynical about this, just being like, oh, they such a success, they're just done. You know, I really wish that I hope that when the larger updates start rolling out, that at least some of the community comes back and gives it another look. I hope that the updates are worthwhile enough to warrant that.
Right.
But until then, just amazing survival game. Especially if you have a group of friends, I don't know if it would be quite as compelling or even like possible to play if you were just trying to solo it. I think that would be very difficult. But it was great. It was great to just have this little outlet. Like a couple nights a week, my friends and I would all hop on Discord and just chill out in our Viking base and maybe go out and into the wilderness and chop some trees and fight goblins or whatever.
I remember you trying to sort of like stress test the bridge mechanics and physics in this game.
Yeah. The construction system is so good.
I remember following that.
Good systems. I mean, it still has its share of issues and bugs, but that was part of the fun of it, just figuring out what we can build without it collapsing in on itself.
At some point, that becomes kind of charming, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I've arrived at my number one game of the year, and it is Psychonauts 2.
Oh, that's not Animal Crossing.
No, it's not. No. Man, what a weird surprise it was that this game is good. The first one I liked. The first one I'm a fan of. I like those characters. I like Tim Schafer in generally. I think his vision for video games and the way he sort of constructs characters and worlds and stuff, I think is compelling. I just think he's an interesting figure in video games as well. I like a good interview with Tim Schafer. The first Psychonauts has not aged gracefully. I think it looks and plays not well anymore, and it's hard to sort of go back to it. So the prospect of almost 17 years later, a sequel to that game coming out, and being teased for a long time, like this was a Kickstarter or whatever 5 years ago. Then they got bought by Microsoft, and I'm like, this game is never coming out. We are never going to play Psychonauts 2. And then it came out, and it's really, really good. It is a lot of the things from the first Psychonauts. It's certainly a lot of the same characters and stuff like that. But obviously with a layer of polish and, modernization that has happened to it to kind of bring it current, to address some of the kind of jankiness and ugliness from the first Psychonauts and make it a little more smooth, a little more playable. In addition, I think, perspectives on psychology and self-care have evolved quite a bit over the last 17 years. And Psychonauts 2 feels like a very sort of modern game in that way, too, in that it, a game that is ostensibly about a character who breaks into the minds of other people and goes in and kind of jimmies with things and monkeys around with stuff to try to solve their problems. Was a little easier to pitch 17 years ago and maybe is a bit of a sensitive thing in 2021. So the game sort of addresses this and in fact, gives a lot of lip service to, it's not your job to solve other people's problems, that you can be a resource, you can be a place of help, a safe spot for them, but it's not for you to break into their brains and play with the wires that sort of make them a whole person.
Yeah, interesting.
Without ever becoming preachy, without ever becoming sort of saccharine, I think Psychonauts 2 does a really sort of deft kind of balancing act at kind of addressing healthcare, self-care, mental health in ways that feel enlightened and intelligent and insightful, without becoming goofy or hokey or preachy or any of those things that could easily devolve into if you came at it from a different perspective. So yeah, I really appreciate that. It is at its most deep a game about kind of the damage that we do to each other and how to work together to kind of fix those things. And I'm like, this is a platformer. It looks like a cartoon. Is you running around and like, blowing up bad guys and knocking over walls and looking for secret entrances and jumping from moving platform to moving platform before they disappear. All of that stuff is there and is fun and is just a delight to play. But there is also this other layer of just really insightful kind of relationships and character building and things like that happen within the game as well. And it's just, it feels like a really smart and thoughtful updating of everything that went into the first Psychonauts 17 years later.
Yeah, that's really surprising and unexpectedly thoughtful from what I know from the first game.
So yeah, what a delight to kind of, for me, to have a year where Psychonauts 2 and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart are out and have come out, within a month and a half of each other, and are awesome mascot platformers, are really fun, really challenging, jumping between boxes and all of the other things that sort of go into those games that I've described that are fairly predictable for this type of game. But to have these really unique characters and this really kind of thoughtful worlds and thoughts on sort of relationships and mental health in Psychonauts and partnership and love in Ratchet and Clank, that these don't have to be in these games. These are not sort of obligatory things that happen in platformers. I don't think that those are even big components of the most famous platformers. If you look at, the best Mario games, if you look at Mario Odyssey, it's not a game about mental health or it's not really even character driven. You're there for Mario, obviously, but it's Mario kind of getting into his hijinks that you find compelling.
Right. It's just him jumping on stuff.
Right. That's the fun of a Mario game. Mario's a bit of a blank slate. There are no blank slates in Ratchet and Clank or Psychonauts. These are really sort of deftly created characters that, some very smart writers have done some really interesting things with that didn't need to be there, but just make them better games for having them there. I still like Mario, though.
Yeah, Mario's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, my number one game of the year, Psychonauts 2. Love that game. Played the hell out of it.
Nice. Speaking of Psychonauts 2, my favorite game of the year, you may have heard of it. Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker came out.
Yeah.
I made it through the queue. I was able to play the entire thing. And it was really good.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how much I'm going to get into it here because I'm planning on doing a deep dive on an upcoming episode because we were off at the time this came out last year at the end of the year. But man, what a ride. It was basically the final chapter to this 10-year storyline that they've been piecing together since the disastrous Final Fantasy XIV 1.0. You know the whole story. They were able to pull the game back together. It has just seen tremendous success since then, and they've been building up to this climax. And I had confidence that the team would be able to pull it off because the last couple of expansions were so good. But still, they do so many things in Endwalker that are just completely surprising. They subvert all of your expectations. It really was just amazing from start to finish. There were a couple, there were a couple slow spots, but in general, very, very good. Like I said, I'm going to go into more detail maybe next week, maybe the week after at some point. But Yeah, definitely a highlight of the year for me.
Cool. I'm intrigued by the sort of the continuity of this thing, of sort of maintaining, a cohesive story that sort of knits itself together from update to update. I think the undertaking there has to be massive. Right? I think it's hard to sort of maintain when you work with these massive teams of making video games, maintain something that sort of feels like a vision, right? It does, sometimes it feels like, and I've complained about this before, Assassin's Creed games feel like they're sort of made by committee.
Oh, yeah.
Where they feel like sort of cobbled together from a bunch of different thoughts that don't really go anywhere. So for you to describe an experience of playing all of these updates over the course of 10 years, right, that feel like sort of a cohesive thing that has come together in a way that's super satisfying, I can't imagine what kind of voodoo or balancing act it must take to achieve that.
Yeah, that's one of the most incredible things about it. And because it's not like they set out in like 2009 or whenever, when they started first writing this thing, and they knew what the story beats were going to be in Endwalker. Like, I'm sure they had some general idea, but it really feels like a lot of like the story from the last few expansions has coalesced over just the last few years. Like, they really had a clear idea of what they wanted to do with it. And they still managed to tie back to all sorts of stuff that happened like a decade ago when they had like different writing teams working on it. And it's been quite a while, but they managed to do it in a way that feels very like thoughtful and still managed to just be incredibly surprising and emotional as well. So just really unbelievable storytelling. It's weird. So whenever I talk about Final Fantasy and like just JRPGs in generally I'm thinking like mainly the storyline. Like if you were to ask me which is my favorite Final Fantasy or whatever, I immediately think about like, oh, which plot did I like the best out of all of these? And then there's so many other components to it. Other than that, there's like the actual game that you're playing. And there's like all the environments and art and music and all this other stuff, which are also very good this time. But just the fact that the story just manages to steal that much attention, I think is a real testament to just how much the quality of the writing and sort of like story direction has improved over the years.
Cool. Well, neat. I'm interested in hearing you talk more about it in a future episode.
Yeah, stay tuned.
I would also like a reminder, so prepare for this, DJ, of the Disastrous 1.0, because I sort of barely remember the story, but I might need you to sort of remind me of what happened and why this is such an amazing feat.
I will be sure to do that, and I will remind you about this again later. But if you're listening to this and you're curious, there is a terrific documentary on YouTube.
Oh, really?
It's pretty accessible, even if you're not familiar with the game. I'll put a link in the show post this week, so you can check it out. But you've got an hour or so. I forget how long the whole thing is, but absolutely worth watching. It's really interesting.
All right. Well, cool. I'm no spoilers. I won't watch it until you tell me the story. But
okay.
I'm intrigued.
All right. Stay tuned.
Yeah. And thus we have arrived at our favorite games of the year. That's exciting.
That was all of them.
Any honorable mentions? Any dishonorable mentions? Anything else you wanna, any contenders? Anything that was like, if you had a number 6, what would your number 6 be?
Number 6. Oh, I don't know.
If you had a number 47, what would your 47 be?
47. The Good Life by Swery65. No, that would. I would put that higher up there. I really enjoyed that. Still making my way through it. A lot of the games, I still have a lot of games to finish. I really wanted to see Fantasian through to the end. Didn't get all the way through the Nier remake, but I guess other honorable mentions would be I really like Aleckhead a lot. I really like Overboard on mobile phones. It's from the 80 Days people. And what else? Alba was very good. Those are all the games I played.
Alba was very good.
I only played like 7 or 8 games last year.
Man, I forgot Alba was this year. Or last year now, but yeah. I like Alba as well. I like Haven Park, which I think is another one of those kind of cozy games that pushes a lot of the same buttons. Not combat driven by any means. Feels very much like a short hike. Just kind of breezy, kind of fun, kind of cute. But you're basically sort of rehabbing a park that has fallen into neglect, not unlike Alba. So yeah, it feels very sort of naturalistic and kind of peaceful. It's nice. I like Bowser's Fury. That was this year, believe it or not. I think that was like February. That was the add-on game for Super Mario 3D World when it came out for the Switch. And it's this interesting. It's brief, but it feels like kind of an interesting kind of proof of concept in like, what if we made an open world Mario game? Maybe it'd be something like this. And it's really cool just from a structural standpoint of how they knit that together. It's very impressive. It's over too soon, unfortunately, but it's definitely worth playing.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I did not end up picking that one up.
Oh, that was a limited time one, right? No, available.
That was you can still get that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, well, the 3-pack was the limited time one. Yeah.
Yeah, was that last year?
I think that was late last year. I think that was
Well, maybe it was late
2020.
And then they mercilessly pulled it from storefronts last year.
Yeah. I like Disco Elysium, but I didn't play enough of it to be able to stand for it. It's my kind of game. Yeah. It also sort of technically came out in 2020, but like the Switch version that I played, the final cut came out in 21, so I could justify it, but I didn't spend enough time with it, and I certainly didn't see enough of it to be able to stand behind it. So I'm intrigued by it, though, and I keep going back to it in it's a bit of a mind trip. It's a little bit it's a little stressful. So I go back to it from time to time and kind of explore a little bit and piece together a few little more elements of the story. And then I have to take a break. I have to take a breather. It's too much.
Okay. Well, glad you didn't give up on it.
No. I find it super, super compelling. I just, it's hard to do long stretches of time with it. So yeah, Disco Elysium. Maybe someday I will finish that as well.
Cool. Played a bunch of good Metroid games this year. I played Metroid Fusion and Super Metroid. Really good. Recommend them to Metroid fans.
Cool. Yeah. I wonder about that, like how many people are getting to like Metroid Dread as their first Metroid game, and should we as the previous generation be, pushing harder for people to kind of experience some of those older games?
Metroid Dread, I don't know what that is. Yeah. I thought that was just a rumor.
Yeah. It's canceled is what I heard.
Oh man. You're gonna get some angry emails.
All right, well, let's wrap this thing up. Listeners, if you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should absolutely follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. You can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about the episode at VGHangover.com as well. We would love for you to join our Discord, hang out with us, chat about video games and stuff. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com. And we would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review us anywhere you can get a podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, all of those fun things, and help us out by telling your friends about the show.
Yeah, it really helps us get the word out, grow the audience, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
I want to give thanks again to our new music this week by Protodome. You can head on over to protodome.bandcamp.com, hear some more of his stuff, maybe buy an album or two.
Nice. All right. Well, we will be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks so much for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya.